Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, The Intimacy Lab. You know, there's something I've been thinking about lately that I believe every couple, whether dating for 6 months or married for 30 years, has felt at some point. That moment when an argument begins not as a disagreement over facts, but as an unraveling of connection itself. A casual comment turns sharp, a question feels like criticism, a sigh carries a world of frustration, and suddenly you find yourself not just disagreeing, but fighting for something deeper. Have you ever wondered why you can have the same fight over and over again? The same script, the same words, the same emotional residue, as if you're trapped in a loop, never quite finding resolution. These are not just petty squabbles about dirty dishes or forgotten plans. They are the kinds of fights that carry a deeper emotional charge, and they often come in patterns. In today's conversation, I want to take you inside the heart of those patterns. We're going to look closely at the 3 types of fights that show up in relationships, how they speak to different needs and fears, and what you can do not to win the fight, but to repair, reconnect, and grow stronger together. Let's begin where this all starts, in that very first spark of conflict, where love meets misunderstanding. You know, there's something I've been thinking about lately that I believe every couple, whether dating for 6 months or married for 30 years, has felt at some point. That moment when an argument begins not as a disagreement over facts, but as an unraveling of connection itself. A casual comment turns sharp, powerful question feels like criticism, asighclriesm, as world of frustration suddenly, intoxicating, disagreeing but fighting for something deeper. Have you ever wondered why you can have the same fight over and over again? The same script, the same words, the same emotional residue, as if you're trapped in a loop, never quite finding resolution. These are not just petty squabbles about dirty dishes or forgotten plans. They are the kinds of fights that carry a deeper emotional charge, and they often come in patterns. In today's conversation, I want to take you inside the heart of those patterns. We're going to look closely at the 3 types of fights that show up in relationships, how they speak to different needs and fears, and what you can do not to win the fight, but to repair, reconnect, and grow stronger together. Let's begin where this all starts, in that very first spark of conflict, where love meets misunderstanding. You see, not every fight is really about the issue at hand. Often, the surface argument is just a doorway into an emotional landscape that feels too vulnerable to articulate directly. A comment about being late can quickly turn into an argument about respect. A fight about household chores can transform into a debate about fairness or appreciation. And sometimes, a tiny misunderstanding can crack open old wounds that have nothing to do with the present moment. So what's really happening? Why do we escalate so quickly? Why do some couples get caught in endless spirals of blame and defensiveness? There is a kind of relational gravity pulling us toward patterns we don't always recognize. That gravity is shaped by our histories, the way we learn to argue or avoid conflict growing up, the attachment styles we carry with us, the fears of abandonment or engulfment we can't quite name but feel nonetheless. In these moments, fights are not just disagreements, they are coded communications. They reveal not just what bothers us, but what we long for: closeness, safety, validation, autonomy. And one of the most common fights I see in couples is what I call the protest fight. The protest fight sounds like this: "You never listen to me. Why don't you ever ask me how my day was? You're always distracted." Underneath these words is a longing, a plea to be seen, heard, felt. It's not about logistics or who did what. It's about attention and emotional presence. When couples are caught in a protest fight, one person often feels invisible while the other feels criticized. The pursuer, desperate for connection, reaches out, sometimes clumsily, sometimes harshly, and the other withdraws, feeling under attack or exhausted by the demands for closeness. The very thing they both want, emotional safety, becomes elusive because the dance itself drives them apart. Have you felt this in your own relationships? That terrible paradox where the more you try to get close, the more distant your partner becomes. The more you ask for attention, the more they seem to disappear behind their phone, their work, their fatigue. In that moment, what can you do? This is where a shift in awareness can change everything. Instead of reacting from the automatic impulse to pursue harder, to defend faster, you can pause. You can take a breath and recognize that what you're really saying when you protest is, "I miss you, I need you, I want to feel you near me." And sometimes that message can be communicated much more powerfully when it's stripped of accusation. Instead of "you never listen to me," you might say, "I feel lonely when I don't feel your attention on me. I need us to sit together tonight, just the two of us." This shift from blame to vulnerability can feel risky. It requires us to lower the shield and speak from a softer place, a place where we admit that underneath the anger is longing. And this is not easy, I know, especially for those of us who grew up believing that emotional needs would be met with rejection or indifference. But this is the first lesson of our journey together today. In a protest fight, remember that the fight itself is often an attempt at connection, but the method may sabotage the goal. The way out is to recognize that and lean into clarity and vulnerability rather than accusation and escalation. And what about the person on the receiving end of the protest, the one who feels bombarded or misunderstood? For them, the key is to stop hearing the criticism and start hearing the bid for connection beneath it. When your partner says "you never care about my feelings," they may really be saying, "I'm hurting and I want you to notice me." If you can listen for that deeper message, if you can soothe the need rather than defend against the words, the fight can become an opportunity for closeness rather than a wedge that drives you apart. I often say to couples, ask yourself, what is your partner really longing for right now? What are they not saying? Can you answer that longing even as you feel your own defenses rising? And here's something interesting to reflect on. Sometimes the one protesting for attention doesn't even realize that their protest is not about the dishwasher or the chores. It's about a feeling of disconnection that has been growing quietly, almost invisibly, for days or even weeks. This is why the timing of these conversations matters too. If you wait until tensions have boiled over, it's much harder to have a productive exchange. But if you can notice the signs of emotional distance early, the subtle silences, the distracted glances, the sense that you're passing each other like ships in the night, you can address disconnection before it turns into a fight. I want you to imagine this next time you find yourself slipping into the protest pattern. Pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what am I really asking for here? What do I need that feels unmet? Then try to name that need gently, directly, and without blame. This practice alone can shift the entire atmosphere of your relationship. It doesn't guarantee that your partner will immediately meet your need, but it creates a space where your true feelings can be heard, and that's a profound beginning. And when you're on the receiving end, try to resist the urge to shut down or retreat. Instead, listen not just for the words, but for the emotion underneath. What if you responded with curiosity rather than defensiveness? What if you said, "It sounds like you feel neglected. How can I show you that I'm here right now?" The protest fight is often the most common type of fight, and yet when understood, it can become a portal to deeper intimacy. Because what it really tells us is that we are hungry for closeness, that even in our anger we care enough to want connection restored. This hunger is not something to be ashamed of. It's human, it's beautiful, it's part of the dance of relationship itself. And so we begin there by recognizing that our conflicts often carry within them a hidden invitation to reconnect, to repair, to step closer rather than pull away. And just as we begin to understand the protest fight as a disguised plea for closeness, we realize that not all conflicts come from this hunger for emotional connection. Some fights carry a very different energy, an energy that isn't about pulling someone closer, but rather about holding on to one's own ground. This brings us to another type of fight that shows up often in relationships, the fight for power and control. Now, if the protest fight is about seeking intimacy, this kind of fight is about seeking autonomy. It's a battle over freedom, over who gets to decide, over whose needs, desires, or preferences will shape the shared space between two people. You might recognize this pattern in arguments that seem to center around decisions where to go on vacation, how to spend money, who gets to make the plans for the weekend. But underneath those decisions is a deeper negotiation about equality and agency. These fights can feel exhausting because they often repeat themselves in subtle ways. The small sniping comments, the eye rolls, the sarcastic remarks about how one person always runs the show, or never compromises. It's not just a disagreement over the thing itself. It's a battle over who gets to steer the relationship. When a couple is caught in this dynamic, each partner can begin to feel as though their individuality is being swallowed by the other. You may start to feel that if you give in, you're giving something up, a part of yourself, your independence, your voice. This is why these fights can feel so intense and disproportionate. It's not about the schedule or the restaurant. It's about dignity and identity. And here's the important thing. Power struggles in relationships are inevitable to some degree. We are two individuals coming together, each with our own histories, our own ways of doing things, our own ideas about fairness and decision-making. The question is not whether power dynamics will exist. They will. The question is how we navigate them so that they don't erode trust or intimacy. So what's really happening when you find yourself locked in this kind of fight? Often, these arguments arise when one or both partners feel that their autonomy is being threatened. And just like with the protest fight, there is a hidden emotional message under the surface. When a partner insists on their way, what they may really be saying is, I need to feel respected here, or I need to know that my opinions matter, or even I don't want to lose myself in this relationship. If you can listen for that emotional subtext, the fight itself can be transformed. Instead of escalating into stubbornness, you can pause and ask, why is this so important to me? Why is it so important to them? Sometimes the very intensity of the argument is a clue that what's at stake is not the subject of the fight, but the feeling of agency and respect. One thing I often invite couples to do is to reflect on their patterns around decision-making and control. Who tends to take charge? Who tends to defer? How much of that is conscious, negotiated, fair? And how much of it is inherited from old dynamics that neither of you have questioned? For example, one partner may have grown up in a household where taking initiative was expected, where organizing was a way to show love. The other partner may have learned to go along to keep the peace, but inside they may be simmering with resentment over feeling overlooked. These patterns collide in adulthood, often without either person fully realizing why they feel so reactive when decisions need to be made. So what can you do when you recognize that you're caught in this tug-of-war? First, slow down. When you feel yourself digging in, pause long enough to ask yourself, am I protecting my autonomy, or am I trying to control my partner? This is an important distinction. Healthy autonomy means honoring your voice and your needs while respecting your partner's. Control, on the other hand, means imposing your preferences in a way that erases the other's autonomy. There is a line, and learning where that line is in your relationship is key. Next, practice what I call collaborative decision-making. This means bringing curiosity and flexibility into moments where you feel your autonomy threatened. Instead of rushing to win the argument, pause and say, help me understand why this matters to you. Or can we find a way that works for both of us, even if it's imperfect? This doesn't mean you will always agree, but it changes the nature of the conversation. The fight becomes less about victory and more about mutual respect. And remember, just as with protest fights, timing matters here too. When emotions are running high, we tend to lose perspective. We become attached to being right. We defend our position as if our dignity depends on it. Sometimes the best thing you can do is step back for a moment, not to withdraw or stonewall, but to cool the emotional heat, so you can return to the conversation from a place of curiosity rather than combat. And if you are the partner who tends to defer, to go along with the other's wishes just to keep the peace, this is your invitation to examine that tendency. Ask yourself, am I silently accumulating resentment? Am I withholding my true preferences because I fear conflict? Suppressing your voice may avoid an argument today, but it often plants the seeds of a much larger conflict down the road. A conflict that erupts suddenly, unexpectedly, and with disproportionate intensity. A healthy relationship thrives not on total agreement but on negotiated differences. When you and your partner can make space for both of your needs, when you can honor each other's autonomy while sharing decision-making power, you begin to dissolve the need for this kind of fight altogether. But this requires honesty, vulnerability, and above all, a willingness to look beyond the surface argument to the emotional core beneath it. So the next time you feel yourselves locked in this battle over plans, money, time, preferences, pause. Look deeper. What part of you is fighting to be seen and heard? What part of your partner feels at risk of being diminished or overlooked? When you understand that these fights are not really about who picks the movie or where to go for dinner, but about feeling respected and free, you can begin to navigate them differently, with more empathy, with more generosity, and with a deeper sense of partnership. And as we sit with this understanding of the fight for power and control, we begin to see that there is yet another type of conflict that many couples face. A fight that sounds different, feels different, and yet can be just as disruptive. And as we sit with this understanding of the fight for power and control, we begin to see that there is yet another type of conflict that many couples face. A fight that sounds different, feels different, and yet can be just as disruptive. This is the kind of fight that doesn't always look like raised voices or angry words. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's cold. Sometimes it's a fight that happens in the silence between two people who have stopped speaking altogether. This is what I think of as the withdrawal fight, a fight where distance itself becomes the weapon. If the protest fight is about pulling your partner close, and the fight for power and control is about holding your ground, then the withdrawal fight is about stepping back, emotionally disengaging, retreating into yourself in a way that feels safer than staying in the relationship's emotional arena. Have you ever felt that slow pulling away, where your partner no longer meets your eyes, no longer asks about your day, no longer reaches for your hand at night, and maybe you too begin to withdraw, responding to their distance with your own silence? The space between you grows wider and wider until it feels like you're living parallel lives under the same roof. This kind of fight is often harder to see, harder to name, because it doesn't look like conflict. There's no yelling, no accusations, no slammed doors. But the emotional disconnection can feel even more painful than an argument, because it suggests not that you matter too much, but that you don't matter at all. And that is the deepest wound, to feel invisible. What's happening here really? Why do some people withdraw rather than engage? Often, withdrawal is a defense mechanism. When the emotional climate in the relationship feels overwhelming, when fights escalate too quickly, when criticism feels too constant, one or both partners may retreat as a way of protecting themselves. They create distance to preserve their sense of self, to avoid further hurt, to stop feeling engulfed by emotion they don't know how to process. But that withdrawal, while protective in the short term, creates a chasm in the relationship over time. The withdrawing partner may feel relief initially, but soon there's a loss of warmth, intimacy, playfulness, spontaneity, and the partner on the other side of that distance often feels abandoned, confused, and alone. In some couples, this becomes a cycle. One person reaches out, the other withdraws. The reaching out becomes more frantic, more demanding, more critical. The withdrawal becomes more entrenched, more frozen, more silent. Eventually, the effort to connect stops altogether, and the relationship slips into resignation, numbness, or quiet. Despair. What can be done when you recognize this withdrawal dynamic? First, it's important to name it, to bring it into the light. It's easy to tell yourself that things are just fine, because you're not arguing, but silence is not the same as peace. It's a different kind of war, a cold war of emotional absence rather than open hostility. If you're the one who tends to withdraw, ask yourself gently, what am I afraid of if I stay present in this conversation? What am I protecting myself from? Sometimes the answer is, I feel inadequate. I feel like I can't get it right, or I don't know how to express myself without things escalating. This self-awareness is crucial because it reveals that your withdrawal is not necessarily about indifference. It's about self-protection, fear, or overwhelm. When you can understand your own behavior this way, you begin to have compassion for yourself and for your partner. And if you're the partner who experiences your loved one's withdrawal, your task is to resist interpreting that distance as a rejection of you personally. Instead, try to understand that withdrawal is often a coping mechanism for emotional flooding. Here's a phrase I often share with couples: distance doesn't mean lack of care, it often means emotional overwhelm. When you can see your partner's silence or absence not as a rejection, but as a signal that they feel overwhelmed, you can begin to approach them with curiosity rather than criticism. For example, you might say, I notice you've been quiet. I don't want to pressure you, but I miss feeling connected to you. Is there something on your mind, or would it help if we just sat together quietly for a while? Sometimes the invitation to reconnect needs to be soft, gentle, low pressure. Demanding a withdrawing partner open up right now can push them further away, but creating a safe emotional space where it's clear that they can re-enter at their own pace can help thaw the ice. And of course, if you recognize that your relationship has fallen into this pattern of withdrawal on both sides, mutual shutting down, it's important to seek ways to break the silence. You might begin with small rituals of reconnection, sharing a meal without devices, taking a walk together, offering simple gestures of care even if words feel difficult at first. One of the most powerful things you can do is to speak directly about the disconnection itself, not as a complaint, but as a heartfelt observation. I feel like we're growing distant, and that makes me sad because I care about us. Notice how that language avoids blame. It's not you're ignoring me, or you don't care anymore. Instead, it's an honest sharing of your own feelings, an invitation to come closer without cornering the other person into defensiveness. And when your partner takes even the smallest step toward re-engaging, a word, a glance, a touch, acknowledge it warmly. Those first small gestures can be the beginning of rebuilding the bridge between you. The withdrawal fight may not look like a fight at all, but its impact can be just as profound. It erodes intimacy quietly, like water wearing away stone. And yet, because it is quiet, it can sometimes be healed more gently too, with patience, kindness, and a willingness to name the distance and step across it together. As we reflect on these three types of fights, the protest fight, the fight for power and control, and the withdrawal fight, we begin to see that every conflict holds within it an opportunity to understand ourselves and each other more deeply, an opportunity to change patterns that no longer serve us, an opportunity to turn rupture into repair. But that requires something courageous from each of us, the willingness to pause, to look beneath the surface, and to communicate not just our frustrations, but our longings, our fears, our vulnerabilities. Because at the heart of every fight in a relationship is not just a disagreement, but a desire for connection, for respect, for freedom, for safety, for love itself. Because at the heart of every fight in a relationship is not just a disagreement, but a desire for connection, for respect, for freedom, for safety, for love itself. And when we can hold that truth with tenderness, we begin to soften the edges of even our most difficult conflicts. But understanding these fights intellectually is only the beginning. The real challenge is how we Bring this understanding into the living, breathing reality of our relationships, because in those moments, when tension rises, when emotions swirl, when familiar patterns threaten to take over, it is so easy to forget everything we know. So let's pause here together and explore what we can actually do when these fights begin to unfold. How do we bring more awareness, compassion, and clarity to the moment itself? It begins with presence. So often when a fight begins, we are already in a state of mental time travel. We're not really in this moment. We're in the past, replaying old hurts. Or we're in the future, imagining the worst possible outcomes. We are defending ourselves not just against what our partner is saying right now, but against everything that's come before and everything we fear will come next. This is where presence becomes a powerful practice. What does it look like? It means grounding yourself in your body when emotions rise. It means noticing, my heart is racing, my breath is shallow. I feel heat in my chest or tightness in my jaw. In that moment, simply acknowledging what is happening inside you can shift your entire state. Presence also means listening, not just for the content of what your partner is saying, but for the emotional music underneath their words. Are they speaking from hurt, from fear, from loneliness? You can ask yourself, what is this fight really about? Not at the level of facts, but at the level of feelings and needs. And presence means noticing your own impulses too. Do you want to interrupt, to correct, to withdraw, to escalate? If you can, notice these impulses with curiosity rather than judgment. You create a small but significant space for choice. That choice is where transformation happens. In the protest fight, for example, when your partner lashes out with criticism, can you choose not to react defensively, but instead to listen for the longing behind the criticism? In the fight for power and control, when you feel yourself digging in your heels, can you pause and ask yourself, am I fighting for respect, or am I trying to win at the expense of connection? And in the withdrawal fight, when you sense yourself retreating into silence or numbness, can you gently ask yourself, what would it take for me to stay just a little bit more present right now? These questions are simple, but they are not easy. They require emotional maturity, self-awareness, and a commitment to growth, not just as a couple, but as individuals. And here's something else to consider. Every fight is shaped not just by what is happening in the moment, but by the unspoken agreements we carry in our relationships. What do I mean by unspoken agreements? These are the implicit rules and expectations we hold often without even realizing it. For example, one partner may have the unspoken belief that love means agreeing on everything. Another may believe that love means giving each other total freedom. When these unspoken agreements clash, fights emerge, not because one person is wrong and the other is right, but because their expectations are different and invisible. Bringing these agreements into awareness can help couples navigate conflict with more clarity. You can ask each other, what do we each expect from conflict itself? Do we see fighting as a sign of trouble, or as a natural part of intimacy? Do we believe that love means harmony, or can we accept that disagreement is inevitable and healthy? These questions can open a whole new conversation, not just about how you fight, but about how you love. And here's a beautiful paradox. Sometimes it's precisely the ability to fight well that reveals the depth of love in a relationship. Fighting well doesn't mean avoiding conflict or suppressing feelings. It means learning how to argue in ways that are respectful, curious, and constructive. It means recognizing that disagreement is part of loving someone who is not you, someone with their own mind, their own history, their own ways of seeing the world. Think about that for a moment. Love is not sameness. Love is not agreement on every detail. Love is the dance between two different people who choose to stay connected even when they don't see things the same way. And so, the real task is not to eliminate conflict, but to engage with it skillfully, lovingly, thoughtfully. When a fight begins, can you create a pause? Can you say, wait, I want to understand. Help me understand what you're feeling right now. Can you shift from blame to curiosity, from winning to connecting? This doesn't mean abandoning your own needs or opinions. It means holding them with clarity and kindness while also making space for your partner's truth. And it means recognizing when you are caught in a pattern, Whether it's the protest fight, the power struggle, or the withdrawal fight, and gently steering the conversation back toward connection, there's a question I love to give couples at moments like this. Are we on the same team right now, or are we treating each other as opponents? That question alone can change everything. When you remember that you are on the same team, the goal shifts. It's no longer about winning the argument. It's about finding a way back to each other. Even if you disagree, even if you don't resolve everything in the moment, you can still say, I care about us more than I care about being right. I want to feel close to you even when we see things differently. And that kind of statement can be profoundly disarming. It lowers defenses, it opens the heart, it reminds both partners of what really matters. Because at the end of the day, most fights are not about the dishes or the schedules or the tiny logistical details that trigger them. They are about feeling seen, heard, respected, safe, loved. When you remember that when you practice listening for the emotional truth behind your partner's words, you begin to create a new relational culture, a culture where conflict is not a threat but an opportunity to repair, to grow, to deepen intimacy, an opportunity to show each other not just how we fight but how we care. So in the heat of your next argument, take that breath, try to remember what's really at stake, not the issue itself but the relationship, the connection, the bond you have chosen to nurture, and then speak from that place, listen from that place, and above all, love from that place, and then speak from that place, listen from that place, and above all, love from that place. But here's something that often goes unnoticed, even by couples who are deeply committed and self-aware. Every fight we have in the present is shaped by the echoes of our past. The way we fight, the way we react, the stories we tell ourselves about what conflict means. All of this is influenced by the relational templates we absorbed long before we met our partner. Think about it. How did your parents or caregivers handle conflict? Did they shout and slam doors, or did they retreat into silence? Was conflict a loud, volcanic eruption followed by apologies and repair? Or was it a quiet, simmering tension that nobody dared name? Did you feel safe enough to speak your truth as a child? Or did you learn that expressing your needs would get you punished, ignored, or dismissed? These early lessons don't disappear when we grow up. They come with us into our adult relationships, operating just below the surface, guiding our impulses when emotions run high. This is why two people can interpret the very same moment in completely different ways. One partner may see silence as kindness, a way to avoid making things worse, while the other experiences that silence as abandonment. One partner may raise their voice because, in their family, loudness was just passion, while the other recoils, feeling deeply unsafe because raised voices in their past meant danger. So when we are in conflict, we are not just fighting with our partner, we are also negotiating with ghosts, ghosts of childhood wounds, ghosts of old coping mechanisms that once served us well but no longer fit the adult intimacy we crave. This is where self-reflection becomes essential. If we don't pause to examine our personal histories, we are destined to reenact them. We will keep bringing the same fight into every relationship, not because the partners are the same, but because we haven't yet understood our own patterns. And self-reflection doesn't have to be an intellectual exercise. It can begin in a very simple way. The next time you feel triggered in a fight, you might ask yourself gently, what does this moment remind me of? When have I felt this way before? Not just with this partner, but long ago. This question alone can illuminate so much. It might help you see that your need for control isn't really about the weekend plans. It's about growing up in a household where everything felt chaotic and unpredictable. It might help you realize that your protest for attention isn't really about this evening. It's about a childhood where your feelings were not prioritized. And when you recognize these patterns, you begin to hold your own reactions with compassion. You see them not as flaws, but as adaptations. You stop blaming yourself, and you stop blaming your partner too, because here's the beautiful thing: when you understand your patterns, you can begin to change them. You can speak from a different place. Instead of saying, "You never listen to me," You might say, when you look at your phone while I'm talking, it reminds me of how invisible I felt as a child. That's why it hurts so much. This kind of vulnerability invites a different response. It invites empathy rather than defensiveness. It invites closeness rather than escalation. And when you understand your partner's patterns too, you can meet them with compassion rather than criticism. You might say, I see that you're shutting down right now, not because you don't care, but because this feels overwhelming to you. I'm here and we can slow down. Conflict then becomes not just a challenge, but an opportunity, a chance to heal old wounds together, to give each other what we may have never received before. Attuned, caring attention during difficult emotional moments, and that healing is what deepens intimacy. It's what allows love to become not just a feeling, but a practice, a daily, courageous, imperfect practice. But this doesn't happen automatically. It requires that we both take responsibility for ourselves, for our triggers, for our histories, and for how we bring them into relationship. It requires that we recognize when we are stuck in reactivity and pause before we say that cutting word or shut that door or scroll through our phones to escape. It requires that we learn to say things like, I'm getting flooded right now. Can we take a short break and come back to this conversation later? Or I realize I'm reacting strongly. I think this is tapping into something deeper for me. These statements don't come naturally to most of us, especially in the heat of the moment. They take practice, but every time you choose this path, you are rewriting the script not just for yourself, but for the relationship itself. And you are showing your partner that even in conflict, you are willing to show up, you are willing to care, to stay curious, to prioritize connection over pride. That is the essence of mature love, not that we never fight, but that we fight differently, that we recognize our shared humanity in those messy, imperfect moments, that we remember that we are two histories meeting each other every day, trying to create something new together. And here's something tender to hold in your heart. Your partner may not always have the tools to meet you in this way right away. You may have more emotional language, more self-awareness, more willingness to explore these dynamics, and that's okay. Sometimes one partner leads the way. Sometimes love means modeling what it looks like to pause, reflect, and communicate differently. You can't control your partner's reactions, but you can influence the atmosphere of your relationship by how you choose to show up. And when you do, you often create an environment where your partner feels safer to soften to. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present, present with your own feelings, present with your partner's feelings, present with the reality that every fight is an invitation to learn, to heal, to grow. And so as you reflect on these three types of fights, the protest fight, the power struggle, the withdrawal fight, notice where you tend to go. Notice where your partner tends to go. Notice the patterns that feel familiar, the triggers that feel sharp, the moments when you lose each other and the moments when you find your way back. These moments matter. They are the micro moments that shape the quality of your love, the texture of your connection, the depth of your intimacy. And the good news is this: every moment is an opportunity to begin again, to choose a different response, to interrupt an old pattern, to speak your truth with kindness, to listen with curiosity rather than defensiveness, and most of all, to remember that conflict is not the enemy. Conflict is simply the place where your differences meet, and it's in how you meet those differences that the quality of your love is revealed. And most of all, to remember that conflict is not the enemy. Conflict is simply the place where your differences meet, and it's in how you meet those differences that the quality of your love is revealed. So what does it mean truly to meet these differences with grace, especially for those of us who carry old wounds, busy lives, tired hearts? It means remembering that love itself is a dance between closeness and distance, between autonomy and connection, between speaking and listening, between asking and receiving. In every relationship, there will be moments where we fail, where we forget, where we lash out or shut down or lose ourselves in the heat of emotion. And when that happens, it's easy to feel ashamed, to believe we've ruined everything, to fall into despair. But this is where the real opportunity begins, not in perfection, but in repair. Repair is one of the most beautiful and underappreciated elements of lasting love. It is the ability to come back to your partner after a rupture and say, I see how we lost each other. I feel how hard that was for both of us. I want to find our way back. Repair is a skill, and like any skill, it takes practice. It requires that we move beyond pride and into humility, that we shift from needing to be right to choosing to be connected. And here's something important. Repair doesn't mean one person always has to apologize first, or that blame must be assigned before peace can be restored. Sometimes repair is simply sitting next to each other quietly after a fight, reaching out a hand, making eye contact again. Sometimes it's a soft laugh, a shared memory, an acknowledgement that even in our differences we want to be close. These moments of repair, small as they may seem, build the resilience of a relationship. They teach us that love is not about never hurting each other. It's about knowing we can come back from those hurts together. So if you've listened this far and you're thinking about your own relationship, I invite you to reflect gently. How do you and your partner repair after a fight? Do you know how to close the gap? Or do you let the distance linger until it becomes harder and harder to bridge? And what would it look like for you to become the initiator of repair? Not because you're taking all the responsibility, but because you're choosing to lead with love. Repair also means checking in, not just after big conflicts, but during the small, quiet seasons of everyday life. It's the practice of emotional maintenance, asking, how are we doing really? Are there things you've felt but haven't said? Are there moments when you needed me and I didn't notice? These questions don't need to come from a place of fear or insecurity. They can come from curiosity, from care, from a desire to tend to the relationship as you would tend to a garden, noticing what needs watering, what needs pruning, what needs attention. And as you tend to your relationship in this way, you create a culture of safety and trust. A culture where both partners know they can bring their full selves, messy, imperfect, emotional, and still be met with kindness, because that, in the end, is what we all long for, to be seen as we are, to be accepted as we are, to be loved as we are. We began this conversation by talking about the 3 types of fights: the protest fight, the power struggle, and the withdrawal fight. And what we've seen together is that these fights are not failures. They are invitations, invitations to grow, invitations to understand ourselves and each other more deeply, invitations to practice patience, presence, and repair. You might even say that conflict, when approached with care, becomes a kind of intimacy itself, a doorway into the deeper layers of our relational life. Because to fight well is to reveal yourself, to show your fears, your desires, your vulnerabilities, to say, this matters to me, to say, I want you to see me, to say, even in this mess, I'm here. I'm willing, and this willingness is what creates a foundation for lasting love. It's not just about compatibility or chemistry or shared interests or physical attraction, though those things matter. Too, it's about the courage to stay, to engage, to keep showing up when it's hard, to keep reaching for each other even when you feel tired, hurt, misunderstood. That reaching, that is love in motion. So as you go forward from this conversation, I encourage you to reflect on your own patterns with tenderness, not judgment, to speak about them with your partner, not as accusations but as stories you're discovering about yourself. You can say, I've noticed that when we argue, I tend to withdraw, and I think that's because conflict felt unsafe for me growing up. I'm trying to stay present, and it would help me if we could slow things down. Or when we disagree, I often feel a need to push harder to get you to understand, and I see now that it comes from a fear of being invisible. I'm going to try to express that more softly. Or when we argue about decisions, I feel this deep need to assert myself because I'm afraid of losing my autonomy. Can we find ways for me to feel more agency while still making decisions together? These kinds of statements shift the tone of your conversations. They move you from adversaries to allies, from blame to mutual understanding, and when both partners can bring this kind of awareness and vulnerability, the relationship transforms not into one without conflict, but into one where conflict becomes a place of intimacy rather than injury. And that is my wish for you, that you can Look at the next fight not with dread but with curiosity, not as a threat but as a doorway, not as evidence that your relationship is broken, but as a sign that your differences are alive. Therefore your relationship has the potential to grow, because love is not about avoiding friction. It's about knowing that when friction happens, you have the tools, the awareness, and the care to work through it together, and that is a love that endures. So as we come to the close of this conversation, I want to leave you with one final thought. Your relationship is a living thing. It breathes, it evolves, it needs tending. Conflict is simply part of that aliveness. It means you care, it means you are invested, it means you are willing to engage, and when you learn to meet your conflicts with presence, with empathy, with compassion, not just for your partner, but for yourself, you create a relationship that can weather storms, that can hold difference, that can sustain love over time. So here's my invitation to you. Next time you find yourself in conflict, pause, breathe, listen, ask yourself, what's really happening here? What am I really feeling? What is my partner really asking for? And then answer that question not with defensiveness but with love. Thank you for being here with me today. If this conversation spoke to you, I encourage you to share your thoughts, your experiences, your reflections in the comments. Let's keep this conversation alive together. And of course, if you found value in this video, I invite you to like, subscribe, and join me again for more insights on love, intimacy, and the beautiful complexities of our relational lives. Until then, take good care of yourself and of your loved ones. Here's to fighting well and loving deeply.